Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The state of Utah has released their 5-year action plan for broadband funding from the BEAD program. Be right back, we'll take a look at that. Thanks for joining me, Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So, state of Utah has come out and released their 5-year action plan. This is something that's required under the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. Louisiana and Maine have released theirs already, so this is the third one, I believe, that's come out. So I'm going to take a quick look at this and see what we've got here. So this is the page, and I've linked to this in the description below, so you can see they've got their what they're calling their digital connectivity plan. Then they've got their digital equity plan up here as well. I was going to take a look at their digital connectivity plan. I think that would be the 5-year action plan, basically. And then down here, they've got where you can, let's see, this is the appendices. This is a plan flyer. And then down here, they've got their unserved and underserved locations map. So that's what this looks like. So they've got showing unserved and underserved locations in the state of Utah. And then they've got them based on various government, association of governments, which is something I'm not familiar with. So I think this looks like maybe groups of counties that are under particular government associations. So you've got Bear River Association, for example, Wasatch Front Regional Council, and again, they're showing the unserved and underserved in each case, Mountain Association of Governments, and whatnot. So you can take a look at that. Again, that's on that same page. And then also on that page, you can download the actual plan, which is what this is. So you've got Utah Broadband Center Connecting Utah Digital Connectivity Plan. Table of contents, you see they've got an executive summary. They've got a background, some basic stuff just to get everybody on the same page and make sure everybody has an understanding of the situation, whatnot. So you got what is broadband, types of internet that are available, an overview of the connectivity plan, current state, kind of the state of what's going on now in broadband, asset inventory, what do they have that they can use, needs and gap assessment, obstacles or barriers, different kinds of challenges that would be in place, and then their implementation plan and conclusion. So again, executive summary, I'm going to zip through this, but there's particular places I just wanted to note. So again, I've got an executive summary here. This just a quick snapshot here. You can see that they've got approximately 41,531 unserved Utahns. I never saw that in writing before. Utahns. And 27,820 underserved Utahns. And you can see those numbers here as well. And this is according to the FCC broadband map that just came out. That's where those numbers come from. So goals and objectives: expand broadband to unserved and underserved areas throughout the state, obviously, to provide access to employment, healthcare, education, social networks, and other needed resources. And obviously, every state plan is kind of follow what the Notice of Funding Opportunity says should be goals and objectives. So they're listing these out, and that's part of obviously what they need to do. Identify and mitigate obstacles and barriers preventing broadband expansion and adoption. Expedite the grant process for supporting internet service providers and navigating federal funding requirements. That will be important to provide assistance to any ISPs that want to do this. Maximize the use of funding to provide the most value to unserved and underserved communities. So that would be looking at value. The best thing you can put out there is fiber, right? So they're going to do their best to maximize fiber, but they also want to make sure that they don't leave places behind if they try to give everyone fiber. They'll probably be able to give most everyone fiber, but there are going to be places that they need to maybe use wireless. They actually mentioned wireless as their second option here in places. Encourage expansion of broadband to community and anchor institutions, and that is a requirement of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Basically, the priority is in the NOFO, all unserved areas, that's anything that's less than 25 by 3, need to be covered. And then you go after the underserved locations. And then if you can get all your unserved and underserved locations, then you look at community anchor institutions. And those need to be served by gigabit symmetrical fiber in those cases. So those are kind of the 3 priorities. And all states are going to be trying to reach those numbers by, again, kind of balancing where they can do fiber the most fiber, you still cover everything else. And obviously, community anchor institutions have to be fiber if you're going to get that gig symmetrical service. There's not much else that's available now. DOCSIS 4.0 will be able to do that, but I don't think that's really feasible right now. So in general, these are going to be fiber, and then some places wireless. Strengthen Utah's economy for new and existing business opportunities. Then they've got some key barriers that I think everyone's kind of aware of. The cost of deployment, obviously, that's high, and it's gone up since all of this started happening. The inflation rate's gone up, so the cost of everything has gone up, including fiber, equipment, labor, interest rates are up. So all of these things increase the cost of deploying fiber. Supply chain constraints, that obviously has become a much more significant problem since the pandemic. Weather and climate, that's a challenge in some cases as far as, what are you going to do with the fiber? Are you going to bury it? Are you going to put it on poles? There's some of that, but there's also a lot of weather, climate kind of stuff in the notice of funding opportunity coming out of a Democratic administration. There's a lot of focus on the environment that maybe is unfortunately in there. I say that unfortunately because really it's not going to make a whit of difference as far as the environment goes as to what's done here, really. But it's in there, and it's something that operators need to take it. It's the states, the eligible entities, and the operators that are going to deploy this stuff need to take into account. Cybersecurity threats, that is not really a barrier or a challenge. It's a barrier. It's a challenge more than a barrier. So there is, and this is a good requirement because cybersecurity right now, there's lots of threats out there, and this is something that is a requirement that states make sure that their eligible entities adhere to something called a NIST framework. And it's basically a framework of cybersecurity kinds of things where you can make sure that you are educating your staff and those that are going to be using systems, that you have intrusion detection so that you can monitor systems 24/7. And, for example, if somebody clicks on a link and they download something that's going to be ransomware, you want to make sure that you get to that before it infects everything and then locks down data. So you need to monitor that stuff and have ways to address that. So there's different things in this framework that cover that. You got to have a cybersecurity plan. So that is a challenge, and it's going to be difficult for internet service providers that are not familiar with that. So I said this is good, and I am biased in one way because we do provide this service. So we provide a security operations center as a service that will do all of these things. We can set up the equipment and help with the plan, help with the security plan on setting up to meet the NIST requirements. Equipment that does intrusion detection, 24/7 staff that monitors everything, that will actually take action. If you're sleeping, they won't let something get infected and then throughout the night spread everywhere. As soon as they see something as an issue, they will lock that down. So we can provide that service. So at the end here, I'll have our contact information. Make sure you get with us if you're a state or an internet service provider, and this is something you're thinking about. We can do that. But this is very important. Right now, we're just trying to figure out what's going on with an attack on government agencies and others. The University System of Georgia, here in Georgia, was attacked by this group that does ransomware and other things. So they're right now, they've infected lots of government agencies as well. And it's interesting that they've come out and said, hey, if you're a government or a police agency, don't worry. We deleted it. We're not going to bother you. In other words, don't come after us. I'm sure hopefully they're going to go after them anyway. But so cybersecurity is a big deal right now. Third-party infrastructure approval, and I believe that's probably rights of way from other parties, making sure that that's a challenge sometimes. Rights to poles, those kinds of things. Permitting or regulatory challenge is very similar. Labor force challenges, again, since the pandemic, this has been an issue, but also just in general. Labor force, those people that are doing the kinds of things in the field are retiring. So you've got, we need to train up a whole new group of people. Plus, there's going to be so much work that's going to need to be done, just more than ever, all happening kind of at the same time as a lot of these funds are dispersed, that's going to be a challenge. And then lack of supporting infrastructure. Key strategies, just pick out a few here. So they need to establish priorities, obviously, while verifying and challenging the existing availability coverage maps. So they're going to try to establish priorities on, again, unserved locations first, then underserved, then community anchor institutions. but also making sure that the maps are right and challenging anything in the maps that don't look right. Prioritize deployment of fiber optics everywhere where costs are feasible, and utilize wireless technologies in other areas where locations are more dispersed or challenging. So again, trying to optimize the amount of fiber, as much fiber as you can. Future-proof, you hear that a lot, and it really is true because the speeds that you're supposed to try to deliver is anything, you try to get over 100 by 20, and really 100 by 100, I believe, is what they say, if I recall, is what you're trying to deliver. But if you can deliver 100 by 100 and you're putting fiber in, you can deliver a gig, and you can deliver 10 gig, and in the future higher than that, because once the fiber is in the ground, there's not much that you have to change out to be able to deliver higher speeds. You have to put in maybe some new cards that support that. The fiber cards today, the GPON or XGS-PON cards, you can install those today. The pricing's not that much higher. You can put those in OLT, and you can deliver GPON service today, and then later flip that over to XGS-PON and get 10 gigabit per second PON symmetrical. So fiber is where it's at, but it's going to be hard to hit that in every single location. So they got to try to prioritize, but then they're saying here their second choice is wireless where they can. Work with ISPs to implement cybersecurity measures. I mentioned that. So let me again also say that any states that are watching this, it looks like Utah, if Utah happens to be watching this, again, contact us about how we can help. We can be a resource for you and make it very easy for any internet service providers that need to do this. Create their plan, follow the NIST requirements, and then have everything in place. We can help them with what policies they need to have in place, what training they need to do, and then also all of the stuff that we would take care of on the back end, like the security assessments, intrusion detection, monitoring, addressing those things. So we can take care of all of that, but that's obviously a big deal. Prioritize the establishment of public-private partnerships through resource sharing. So that's important as you have different public entities out there, and the private companies you can leverage some of that. And they talk specifically here about the Department of Transportation and for middle mile infrastructure that we'll see. Ensuring no duplication of funding resources occurs in the same areas. So they've got to determine, they got to make sure where they've gotten funding from something like ARPA or RDOF or USDA, Reconnect, anything that's federally funded that would be committed. I think all of those would apply. Anything that's committed, that's going to be building, that has already built or will be building infrastructure that is at least, let's say, 100 by 20, you're not supposed to overbuild that. So they need to make sure they look at that carefully. Work with the Department of Transportation and ISPs to close the middle mile gaps through program funds or infrastructure sharing. And that's that DOT, that's kind of goes in with the public-private partnership that we'll see. And they've got their timeline here. They're kind of in this range around here. You see June 22nd, August 23, and here they are. They've published their 5-year plans. They've done a lot of this stuff, and this is kind of the next step, the initial proposal. Then they've got their final proposal, and then we're looking here at the timelines, and you can see the first grant rounds they're looking at are going to be next year, January 24th through January of 24 through December of 2024. And then 25 through 28, they're looking at construction and auditing, monitoring, making sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So this is the timeline they have to follow. Now, as far as, again, they're out with their 5-year plan now, and we see, like as I mentioned, there's 3 states that have come out. The timeline for that, as far as the requirement and the notice funding opportunity, the 5-year plan had to be out 270 days after the state received their initial planning funds. So most states, they kind of all requested those and received them very quickly within, like, let's say, if I remember, it was like a 30-day period. And then from there on, every state had 270 days from that point to get their 5-year action plan out. That would be what we're looking at here for Utah. Then their initial proposal, that's got to come out 180 days after the state finds out how much money they're going to get, which they're going to find out in just a little over a week. So June 30th is when the NTIA says they're coming out, and they're going to tell every state how much funding they're going to get. Now, that's when it gets announced. I don't know if there's some formal communication that goes out. They send a letter to the state and says, okay, here's your funds. Maybe it's a week or 2 after that. But in general, 180 days after the state finds out how much funding they get, they have to have their initial proposal done. And then after their initial proposal is looked at and approved by the NTIA, then they have a whole year, 365 years, to get their final proposal out. So you can see how this stretches out here into 2024, because even their final proposal, they don't have to use the 365 days, but they've got 365 days after their initial proposal is approved to get their final proposal out. So that's kind of the timeline there. Background stuff. I noted this for some reason. Let's see. The American Community Survey finds that 26,058 Utah households did not have access to a smartphone, desktop, laptop, or tablet. So it talks about the unserved and the underserved here, the 41,000 plus unserved and 27,000 plus underserved. And then you've got 26,000 plus that don't have any kind of anything to connect, not even a phone, not even a smartphone. And this kind of shows you that you can get 100% universal broadband coverage, but you're not going to get, very unlikely to get universal broadband adoption, at least not now, maybe in the future, as a lot of us old folks die off. And it's really older than me because I have broadband. But there are just going to be some people that don't feel they need internet. They're just not into it. They're not that interested. And it could be because they can't afford equipment, but a tablet, with the Affordable Connectivity Program, and you can, in a lot of places you can get a tablet or a laptop and get a discounted price on that. Right now, anybody who's saying they can't afford it, it's probably that they can't afford it, and maybe they really don't care that they can't afford it. Some people say they don't understand it. So there are, like I say, there are going to be a lot of seniors that, frankly, they don't feel like they need it. They just don't. So you're not going to have a 100% universal broadband adoption, and you'll find you see here there's a lot of people that don't have devices, and it's very possible that a good number of these, once they have access to broadband, even if you provided them a device, they may not care. Again, they may need to get trained up on it, and there's some of that. It's like, again, somebody who's like, I just don't know what to do with it. Well, maybe you can help train them, but do they really need it? I think people who really need it will try to figure it out or seek that out. So we just need to be aware, even though there's a lot of people who don't have broadband, there's a lot of people that don't have the equipment and may not have a desire to have it. What is broadband? So lots of explanations here on what that is, about the different thresholds, served, underserved, served, unserved, different speeds. Talks about middle mile network here. So you've got your last mile network, and then you've got your middle mile connecting up to the broader internet. Different kinds of uses, healthcare, education, types of internet. So a lot of educational stuff here, wireless, satellite, cellular, types of networks again. So all of that. Overview of the digital connectivity plan. Then we get the revision. Goals and objectives. So look at a couple of these. Collaborate with potential subgrantees. Obviously, that's going to be important. They're going to have ISPs that are going to be interested in doing this, and I'm sure they've already touched base with all of them. In fact, I think it even mentions that they've talked to them all in here already. Align new funding opportunities with existing projects to optimize broadband deployment objectives. So that would be, again, projects right now that are funded through some other source. It could be private funding that's already in place. Develop broadband investment and deployment strategies for unserved and underserved areas. Those are their two top priorities. Identify and utilize public-private partnerships. Again, the DOT there is mentioned. The middle mile, again, mentioning the DOT later. Subgrantee selection process to distribute the funds. They've got to create that. Their initial proposal, again, that they've got to do. The final proposal, again, a year after the initial one is approved. They have that time frame. Update and collaborate with key stakeholders and communities throughout the process. So in addition to having already done a lot of the stakeholder engagement with communities, with ISPs, with other stakeholders, they want to maintain that as an ongoing kind of thing. Increase awareness among policymakers and members of the public on important milestones, announcements, funding, etc. These would be your obstacles. I just highlight a couple of developing recommendations for streamlining permitting processes, identifying areas where fiber optic broadband networks are not feasible. Again, where does it not make economic sense to do that, and what are they going to do about it? Streamline permitting review process. So two things here relating to permitting. Increase skilled workforce availability. So how do they do that? Are there universities in the state? Can they help partner with others? The Fiber Broadband Association has a program where they help get training implemented in various places. Maybe they can work with them. So they need to figure out how they're going to get a skilled workforce available to be able to build and then maintain this huge broadband infrastructure that's being put in all over the country, and specifically here in Utah. Ensure robust cybersecurity for users, ISPs, and subgrantees. So again, that's mentioned again here. Work with ISPs. This is maximizing use of funding to provide the most value. So working with ISPs to develop low-cost and no-cost service plan thresholds. So every ISP that takes funds needs to have a low-cost plan, and the state needs to, I think the state is going to be the one working with ISPs to figure out where that threshold is. What is a low-cost plan? And it's going to vary based on state, and it may vary based on, I'm assuming it may vary based on area of a state. So if you've got a ISP that's in a particularly rural area, they serve farms, then it's going to be more expensive for them to serve customers than it would be for somebody that's in a very dense area where you've got lots of single family homes close together. So I think the low cost threshold is probably going to vary by the state and who the ISP is and how difficult it is, how difficult the terrain is, how many customers there are in a particular area. So they got to work on all of that. Explore ways to encourage competition amongst ISPs. Open access is one way to do that I'm sure they're looking at. In fact, it mentions that in here, open access. Prioritizing fiber optic, as we mentioned, optimize project funds, as we mentioned, a mix of fiber and wireless, improve broadband availability to anchor institutions, prioritize funding, and again, in that particular order. They got strengthen the economy, some other stuff in here, current state of broadband. So they talk about the state of broadband currently in Utah. Some of the locations that were identified as BSLs, or broadband serviceable locations on the FCC map, were actually outbuildings or large objects that resembled buildings, and other locations that should have been identified as broadband serviceable were not included on the map. So, it was quite an undertaking for CostQuest, the company that the FCC contracted with, to figure out every single structure in the country that's supposed to have broadband. And they looked at tax records and they looked at, I can't remember all the stuff they looked at. They looked at a whole bunch of data, including maps and satellite images. And when you look at satellite images and you got a parcel, say look at parcel data, when you got a parcel and you got different, what look like structures on there, then they had to try to figure out, okay, let's look at the roof line. Let's try to train this software, AI software, to figure out what's a broadband serviceable location and what's not. So is this a house, or is this a barn, or is this a shed, or is this a boulder kind of stuff? So you see here, they said some were outbuildings or large objects. Maybe it was a boulder that looked like a building. So some of these things had a little dot on there, and they were obviously not really a location that should be serviced. And then there were some that were not, there were no dots on the map, and they should have been serviceable. So they found both of those. They say during this challenge process, Utah was successful in challenging the map and adding an additional 24,598 BSLs and correcting 23,491 primary addresses. So that was probably looking where, maybe the wrong structure was marked as the BSL when it should have been another one, or maybe the address was off. So they made those corrections. What else we got in here? Current activities. So they got, it's a lot about what's going on right now, kind of the lay of the land. Then they talk about partnerships. And this is where they talk again about the Department of Transportation. So again, public-private partnerships. And one key agency for middle mile expansion is UDOT, Utah Department of Transportation. Its involvement in managing, controlling state and federal highway rights of way makes it partnership critical to providers to close middle mile gaps. Without UDOT's involvement, obtaining right-of-way clearances, permits, and environmental approvals can otherwise be very slow for broadband providers to obtain. Under state law, UDOT right-of-way and telecommunication infrastructure is telecom carrier neutral. This allows for providers to utilize UDOT-owned conduits for installation of provider-owned cables, enabling the build-out in communities at much lower price. It also provides equal opportunities for any entity to partner with UDOT, which promotes competition and better pricing for subscribers. So that's good there. Again, it mentions it here. Meetings with internet service providers. So yeah, they talk to every single internet service provider, it sounds like. While creating the plan, collaborating one-on-one with every ISP in Utah was a high priority. Purpose of these one-on-one meetings was to coordinate with the ISPs on a wide range of topics and issues listed below. The UBC hosted 46 one-on-one meetings with ISPs, and I highlighted a couple here. ISPs, these are the main topics that they discussed, and then they had some reservations, which I thought were interesting. ISPs' reservations in providing their exact infrastructure data. And I'm not sure what they mean by reservations and exact infrastructure data. So maybe they were concerned about some proprietary infrastructure that they didn't want to give all the details on, and they didn't want their competitors to know about. I don't know what that was about. Concerns over BEAD funding requirements. So these are some of the same things that we know are a problem. Workforce requirements, so challenges there. Challenge process design, definition of unserved, and that would mean unlicensed wireless. So, is unlicensed wireless considered reliable broadband? It's not. Combination of unlicensed and licensed is, or licensed is. But then there's also the question of CBRS spectrum, which is not really licensed, but I believe from what I've saw recently, it may be that will be considered licensed because it is something that is controlled by spectrum sharing that the FCC set up, the CBRS spectrum. So CBRS can be licensed spectrum, but you also have general access licenses, and it's prioritized through spectrum sharing. So that might be considered okay. Older copper systems, so if you have, DSL is actually considered reliable broadband, okay? But it does have to meet the speed requirements. So if somebody if an operator has a customer on DSL and they're somehow able to get over, let's say they can get over 25 by 3, well, then it's not really unserved because it's considered reliable broadband and then it's DSL. Maybe they don't get 100 by 20. But then maybe you could get DSL that's over 100 by 20. But again, it's old copper infrastructure. So, what do you do about that? And is that really something that we want to leave in the ground? Probably not. And I'm sure the operator, the phone company, whoever it is that has that DSL would rather take funds and upgrade that to fiber if at all possible. Subgrantee, wait a minute. Here's a few other things I highlighted. So workforce availability, supply chain constraints, permitting and process in challenging areas, as we mentioned. And I got the logos of all the folks that they talked to here. External engagement and stakeholder input. They did a lot of that, obviously. They talk about the different stakeholders that they touch base with here. You can look through all of this. They've got their stakeholder meetings they went through. They list all of those. Lots of that. See 2022, 2023. Infrastructure and broadband availability. Kind of zip through that. Community resources, zipping through here, asset inventory. They look at more maps and who has broadband, who doesn't in here. Made a note here, municipal open access broadband network. So they mentioned this in here. It says many Utah municipalities offer a municipally owned open access fiber broadband network to all broadband serviceable locations within their jurisdiction. For example, the Utah Telecommunication Open Infrastructure Agency, or UTOPIA, I love that acronym, is a local ISP that's been providing this service for over 20 years to various municipalities. So they are, I believe they're based in Utah and well known for open access. In fact, they have branched out beyond Utah. California, earlier this year, made an announcement that Utopia is going to be helping them with an open access network in California. So Utah is kind of at the forefront and ahead in the area of open access. And the thing about open access, it says that, open access, basically, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. And it, varies as to who owns the network, who has to install the customer. A lot of times, if it's a municipality, they may own the network, but maybe they have internet service providers that come in. They don't have to put in the fiber, but maybe they do the last mile connection. Or maybe the city does that, and it could be that all the ISP does is market the service, and they provide support for billing, and maybe some simple technical support, where it doesn't require a truck roll, those kinds of things. Not simple, but first tier technical support. And then there's, others where there's other open access networks that are so automated where a customer can go to a web page and say, let's see, I'm on ABC provider right now. I think I'll try out these guys. They click a button and it automatically provisions them to the new provider. So it can vary on these open access networks. And it does provide competition. You have, again, depending on how much the ISPs can differentiate themselves, it does provide competition. ISPs can, a lot of times over these networks, can determine that they want to offer higher speeds or that they don't want to offer certain speeds. They can maybe provide additional services over those open access networks. So while they may be doing nothing as far as with the connection, the fiber's already there, it's already installed to the customer, the city, or whoever takes care of all that process. They provide billing, they provide marketing, but they can also provide other services over that. So they can provide, for example, voice service. That doesn't have to be provided by the open access provider. They can provide an IPTV service. They can differentiate themselves by the level of customer support and technical support that they provide. And by the way, once again, a little plug for us. If you're operating an open access network or you are on an open access network, we provide the kinds of services that you can differentiate yourself with. So we have a fully hosted residential and commercial VoIP product that will work over any internet network. You don't have to have the equipment as far as the switch. You don't have to worry about phone numbers, E911. We take care of all of that. We have an IPTV product where you don't need to worry about programming and very little equipment. We can take care of that. We do help desk end user support 24/7, everything from basic support up through premium support of supporting home networks. So it can be 24/7 or when you need us. So don't forget us for that either. Again, our contact info will be at the end of this. Let's see what else we got here. It talks about the Affordable Connectivity Program. So affordability, Lifeline service, public Wi-Fi network. So again, they're looking at basically taking stock of what they've got right now, needs and gaps assessments. They're looking at, where are the gaps in all of this. I think I'm about done here. I might have been one other thing I wanted to highlight. I just saw something here. Table 10, Connecting Utah Residents Survey. So they did a survey of Utah residents. I thought this was interesting. On why people don't have internet at their residence. So you can see here 41%. And these are people could answer obviously more than one question because it totals more than 100%. But you can see 41% said monthly charges are too expensive. So this is someone who, would not, I mentioned the ACP before. Obviously somebody has to qualify for the ACP. So this is somebody who would not qualify for the ACP, but they feel like it's just not worth the money. Now, you can get the ACP. There's lots of ways you can get the ACP. So these folks, they make a pretty good living, but maybe it's not as important to them. They feel like the monthly charges are too expensive. And it could be that, if it's $80 a month, whatever, they may not want to pay that and have better things they can do with their money. Maybe they get faster internet at work. And when it says internet access at your residence, these could be folks that have a cell phone, but they don't have a wired or wireless connection as far as fixed wireless connection. I don't know if that counts. So somebody could be just fine with, hey, I can get on my phone and I can look something up and I can stream something to my TV from my phone, and they don't necessarily have to go over a wired connection. I don't know if that is included in not having home internet or internet at your residence. Internet connection is not available in my area. Obviously, that would be what we're trying to resolve here, 34%. Answered that way. Initial connection fees are too expensive, so that would be your setup fee. It's like, well, I could afford the monthly, but I don't want to pay the $100 or whatever the setup fee is. I don't know. And if satellite's the only thing that's available, that's a fairly high. I'm thinking specifically of Starlink. That's a fairly high setup fee. I think it might be $500, and then it's like $110 a month or something like that. So that's a cost thing. Don't have a computer or tablet to use. We saw that was one of the issues. 20-something thousand, 25,000, I think, folks there. I access the internet at a public internet source such as a library or community center. So in other words, that whenever they need the internet, that's fine for them. I do not know how to get internet service. So I'm thinking here, this is somebody, again, maybe somebody elderly, older, don't need it. I'm not interested in it. Again, probably somebody who's never had it, don't know why they need it. I suppose you could educate them on that, but there's going to be a certain number of people that are not going to get it. I have physical limitations. Could be something with, maybe some kind of a handicap where they can't use that. I'm worried about privacy and others getting my information. There are a certain number of people that are worried about that. They don't want to be connected to anything. As they say, the only safe connection is no connection at all, or as they say, there's 10 inches of air, nothing connected. So there's some folks that worry about that. They cover broadband affordability in here. I talk about how many people are enrolled in the ACP. And I think that was pretty much all I was going to show here on this 5-year plan. So a lot more reading you can do. So again, I link to this. So, you may want to go take a look at that. But again, so this is the third 5-year plan that's out. And this one I like. I find that it's very attractive as a marketing person. I thought it was really well laid out. They got a kind of a common color scheme here, and in their mapping, that kind of thing. So I thought it was very well done. So again, that's the third one that's out, and there will be more to follow. Again, the time frame for this would be 270 days after folks got their initial planning funds. So we're going to start seeing these drop, I think, very soon. And then, June 30th, we'll be finding out what the allocation is for all of the states. I think we have a pretty good idea at this point based on the FCC maps. I think most states have a good idea of what they're going to be getting. They just need to find out the final amounts, and they're going to go from there. Appreciate you joining me today. Thanks a lot. If this was helpful or interesting, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you click the little bell to be notified when I'm live, and you'll get a little pop-up there when I am live. You can choose to watch then, choose to watch the recording later, or just don't watch at all if it's not something you're interested in. But I appreciate it anyway. Thanks a lot, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.